Good evening and welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I'm joined this week by Louis Sung, Chad Ronenbaum, and Kathy D'Amato will be coming in shortly. She's running a bit late tonight, but she will be joining us. We have quite a bit to talk about. Of course, the owners' meetings this past week in Phoenix, Arizona. Coaches were there. General managers were there, of course. Agents were there. Everyone else, that seemed to have a role in a front office was there, present, and they all talked. Joe Philbin talked during his breakfast. Stephen Ross held his own press conference, and he said some crazy stuff. Dennis Hickey held his own press conference. Mike Tannenbaum had his own press conference, went to Radio Row, made the rounds, went through it all. So we're going to talk about the everything that came out of Phoenix this past week, whether it's the extension with Joe Philbin, the news about Dion Jordan staying at defensive end. Is there a trade on the horizon for him? I know there's some rumors going around about that. The offensive line, Billy Turner, Dallas Thomas, the whole spat, the public disagreement where Ross said one day that Tannehill wasn't connecting on his deep ball. Joe Philbin said the next day that it wasn't all his fault. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about Louis Delmas. I know that's Louis's boy over there, Florida sport debater, loves Delmas. And he's going to, really talk about him and how much he loves him and maybe show you and everything else. Knowshon, Moreno, Branden, Albert, Matt Moore. And then anything else that pops up along the way, we are going to discuss. We're with you for at least the next hour or so. Sit tight, get your popcorn ready, get your soda, get your beer, get your milkshake, get your coffee, get your tea, whatever it is you're drinking on this lovely night. Sit down, enjoy the show, do what you got to do. First, we're going to talk about, a very low-key signing. I'm just going to mention it very briefly. Is LaMichael James, running back for the Dolphins, signed. He will compete in camp with Damian Williams, Mike Gillislee. I don't expect Gillislee to win a job. I expect him to be cut. So we'll probably, depending on what the Dolphins do in the draft, or if they add a veteran running back after the draft, which we'll talk about a little later, that's what it's looking like right now. Nothing guaranteed for LaMichael James. Nothing guaranteed for Damian Williams as well, even though he looks like the number 2 running back cemented in the depth chart right now. So that happened, but another thing that happened was the fact that Stephen Ross announced a 1-year contract extension for Joe Philbin. And what does that all mean? I saw a lot of fans on Twitter going crazy with that news, saying, the Dolphins don't know what they're doing. Stephen Ross doesn't know what he's doing. Why is he giving Joe Philbin a 1-year contract extension? Media analysts, Joe Philbin hasn't had a winning record in 3 years. Why is he getting a contract extension? And then today, of course, news out of Indianapolis, Chuck Pagano, dude goes to the AFC Championship game last year, no contract extension. He's basically a lame duck coach this year. So what gives? Obviously each organization has its own way of thinking. We saw it with the Dallas Cowboys last year, how they didn't give Jason Garrett a contract extension. But I would have to say that this is a smart move by the Dolphins, and I posted this on the site when we announced the news of it. There's nothing to lose for Stephen Ross and the Miami Dolphins by giving Joe Philbin a contract extension, and they have everything to gain. If they didn't offer him a contract extension, they would have everything to lose. Let's say perhaps that Joe Philbin turns his team around, which there are signs of doing whether you want to admit it or not. Let's say he turns his team around and makes it to the playoffs in his 4th year as head coach. Maybe he makes a run deep into the playoffs. All of a sudden, these people around the league, these owners are going to say, hey, the Dolphins gave Philbin a chance, for 3 years to build a team. He got his own guys in there. He finally turned it around, and look how dominant they were. This is, of course, assuming they go deep into the playoffs. Now, I don't think Joe Philbin would go and chase the money because he's talked about how loyal Stephen Ross was to him, and Joe Philbin's a loyal guy. So I don't think any of this would ever happen. But let's say an owner comes out and throws all the money in the world at Philbin, offers him all these other things, offers him a little more control of the roster, and then all of a sudden Stephen Ross is in a bidding war with another team. Does Stephen Ross want that? No. If Joe Philbin takes his team deep into the playoffs, they have him under contract for 1 more year. They could do another extension. They could let him try to prove himself for another year. Or they can work out a long-term deal, like I just said, even longer than just a short-term extension, while he's with the Dolphins, while he's under wraps. There's no reason for Stephen Ross to get into a bidding war over a coach because he wasn't betting on his own guy. That's basically what he's doing right now. He's betting on his own guy to lead them to where they want to be. And if he doesn't work out this year and Stephen Ross decides to fire him, well, then so be it. Stephen Ross eats the money. There's no harm to the Dolphins salary cap, no harm to my pockets, no harm to your pockets. It's just basically, it is what it is. Your thoughts, Lewis, Chad? I know, Chad, you were for the contract extension. Lewis, I'm not sure your thoughts, but of course you guys hear me. I'm for it.
Yeah, I was. Go ahead, Lewis.
All right. Truth be told, man, I this doesn't really mean anything to me whatsoever. I mean, let's not forget that a couple of years back, before Philbin even showed up, we had Jim Harbaugh being chased by our beloved owner Stephen Ross, and when he didn't get him, we wound up picking up Tony Sparano for a contract extension, which meant absolutely nothing because he got fired as soon as the season was over. In fact, I think he got fired before the season was over. So, contract extension for Joe Philbin doesn't mean anything to me. It's really just a matter of trying to be classy, trying to be nice to the guy who's currently in charge, trying to at least make a facade of faith in the head coach. It doesn't really matter how. It could have been a 5-year extension for all we care. In my honest opinion, the only thing that's going to save Joe Philbin's job coming next year, it wouldn't even matter if it was a 10-year extension. The only way he's still here come next season is if the Dolphins somehow make the playoffs. We got to get over this hump. Otherwise, we're just going to have to move on and find someone else. No more 8-8.
Yeah, I agree, Lois. I think that's the whole idea. Matt you covered it very well. The only person that put anything at risk by extending Joe Philbin was just Stephen Ross, and he's just putting money at risk. He's not putting any competitive balance of the team at risk at all. So I think it was a smart move, despite I know Joe Philbin is not very popular among the fans, but what happens if the Dolphins, granted this is highly unlikely, but what if they go undefeated and then you have Joe Philbin not under contract?
If the Dolphins go undefeated, you're going to have a statue of Joe Philbin outside the stadium.
Well, that's my point. I know
that's
a ludicrous statement, but my point being is, why wouldn't you extend his contract now if you don't want to risk any kind of a bidding war with him? And I don't know what the details were of that contract, but I completely understand why Stephen Ross did it. Now, I think it would have been a lot more questionable if he had given him like a heavy guaranteed 5-year contract, because people have been wondering what in the world. But just a 1-year extension, to me, it does do what Lewis said. It helps try to get the idea that he's in a lame duck coaching year away, even though I really don't think it accomplishes that. It does help with that a little bit. And then, of course, like we said, it helps if he does have a successful year, ensuring that there's no issues with his contract.
Looks like Kathy has joined us. Kathy, are you able to unmute your phone over there? I'm not sure. We might be having some technical difficulties with Kathy. Kathy, if you could just jump in whenever you can, if you could hear us, if you could talk.
Hi.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. So you've been listening to us. This was supposed to be your topic to lead off, but you got here a little late, having a little too much fun in the city. Thursday night, we get it. What are your thoughts on
I like the quote that Philbin said, that you don't get the best out of someone when you're operating with a gun to your head. So I think that this extended contract just puts a little pressure off of him, so that hopefully we make the playoffs this year, and then we can go from there. He definitely has to do better this year. I think it's playoffs or he's out of here. But, yeah, just from what I heard from you guys, I completely agree. I think it's a good move for both of us.
Yeah, it's a good move, but it's a meaningless move. So, really, it doesn't make any difference either way. Whether he had, as Ross would say, a gun to his head or not, the result's going to be the same. It's either playoffs or bust.
Well, we don't know for sure, because Ross kind of backed off from that. He said the roster has to improve from last year. I mean, obviously, everyone thinks that's playoffs, but we all thought that last year as well. I could honestly see Joe Philbin getting another year. If they don't make the playoffs, call me crazy, but I guess
really,
you're not crazy. It's just it's not desirable at all.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not desirable. I don't even know how to say that word. I think I've been drinking a little too much tonight. It's not. You're right, but we're not in Stephen Ross's shoes. Who knows what's going on with him? I'm sure Mike Tannenbaum will have a lot of influence. We'll have to see how this year plays out for sure. But, with Philbin with that 1-year extension, obviously he has a little more power, not too much because really Tannenbaum is running the show, and we've seen with the way the roster's been shaping out, maybe guys that Philbin wouldn't have thought about bringing in, maybe guys that Philbin would have shied away from. We're seeing a lot more action going around these guys, and even in the draft with it coming up in, I think it's 35 days, people are spreading rumors and talking about different prospects that maybe Joe Philbin normally wouldn't bring on the team. Again, Mike Tannenbaum is running the show, so while Philbin doesn't have as much power, maybe zero power now over the roster, he does have a little more power with the way the players are utilized on the field. And one thing that came out of the owners' meeting this week is that he said Dion Jordan is staying at defensive end and no longer considering moving him to linebacker. This is obviously a touchy subject, and I know I went off on Twitter on it, a few others went off on Twitter, and it was a whole back and forth going on. And I was walking into Target buying my wife medicine because she's been sick the whole weekend, and I thought of something. I said, hey, maybe Dion Jordan isn't smart enough to play the outside linebacker position. And I tweeted it as I was walking into Target. And I put my phone away because I don't get service in Target where I'm at. And I came out, paid for the medicine, bought a soda, I think, for myself, got in my car, looked at the notifications, and there were over 20 of them. And I was like, oh, God, what the hell did I just do? And then I'm looking at it, some people are agreeing with me. And then one popped out, Randy McMichael, who was on our show last week, former tight end. Caps lock. Thank you, God, someone said it, not me, or something to that nature. And, that made me think, a former football player, former NFL player coming out like that, because they know the game obviously more than any of us, okay? And for him to say that obviously means a lot. I'm going to stop going on my rant. Chad, I know you did a film review on Dion Jordan a few months ago. What did you see in terms of his ability to play the linebacker position, his ability to stay in coverage? Can he handle it, or is just the coaching staff being stubborn?
It's tough to say if he can handle it or not based on doing film review because he just hasn't had that many repetitions at linebacker. I find it hard to believe it's just that he's not smart enough to do it. And my analogy to that is if I were to just ask the question, who do you think was the best outside linebacker of all time in the NFL? I mean, do you guys have an answer on that?
I would probably have to really lean towards Philip Wheeler.
Yeah, good answer. Where I was going was I would say probably who would be considered the greatest outside linebacker of all time would be Lawrence Taylor. And no disrespect to Lawrence Taylor, but that guy is not that smart in my opinion, and he was one of the best ever. And so, does Coyle run complex schemes, and is Dion Jordan maybe not the highest IQ defender on the field? I could understand that, but to me, that's the excuse of coaching again. It's the coach's job to get him ready, make him understand what he's need to do. Now, if he's not, understanding all the different formations or something, and you can't keep him on the field all the time, I can see that. But the reality is they've hardly played him at all at linebacker. So, I mean, I'm sure they could get him prepared to play some of their base formations at the very least. They can definitely have him rush the passer from the outside linebacker spot. So I don't think that's the huge factor. I think the thing that happened was they should have made Dion Jordan an outside linebacker as a rookie, and they decided to put him at defensive end. And when he came to the team, he was more of a 255, 260-pound football player who could run really well. And, what they did then in his offseason is they bulked him up to more of a 275-pound guy. And when I was looking at him in camp, I was like, oh, my God, he's a tank. He was huge. And so I don't know if he still has enough quickness to play outside linebacker on an every down basis. But to me, it doesn't matter. I mean, can he play outside linebacker? Can he play defensive end? To me, that's asking the wrong question is what can Dion Jordan do? My question always falls back to what does the team need? And I thought last season the people they had in there were just quite a bit lower on a scale of talent compared to Dion Jordan. I mean, Philip Wheeler, Jason Trusnick, Kelvin Shepard. I wasn't impressed with any of those guys playing linebacker, and I I don't think Dion Jordan could have done a lot worse. That was my opinion. So I don't know why he didn't play a lot more outside linebacker. And then having him at defensive end, I actually think he's a solid defensive end from the amount I've seen him play. He's played a lot more defensive end on film than outside linebacker. He didn't look like he was doing a poor job to me on film. It's just we have Cameron Wake and Olivier Vernon, and you just don't get many reps with him. And Coyle tried to move him around at times. So he's really become this player that's in limbo of, can he play outside linebacker? Probably not every down. Can he play defensive end? Yes, but they don't really need him. And so it just becomes this convoluted mess of what are you doing with him? And so obviously that makes him a candidate for trade talks. You've pointed out in the past, Matt, that he has a contract that's not very conducive to trading. Now that we've passed into closer to June in the draft and stuff, I think it's foreseeable he actually could get traded because, as you get to another season, then more of his bonus that he signed as a rookie was prorated out. And so I think he is potentially tradable, but I don't think...
Real quick on that trade thing. Chris Kaufman, one of the more respected guys on Dolphins Twitter, mentioned something about how the trading Dion Jordan isn't impossible because of possible offset language, because of bonuses, guarantees, and whatnot. And the new team would have to take on all of that contract structure. So really, we see it on Over the Cap and other places as just a pure hit, but we're not taking into account the other teams. So, after reading what C.K. Parrott, who's Chris Kaufman, had to say, if you're on Twitter right now, look him up, C.K. Parrott, P-A-R-R-O-T. And go back in time a little bit, a few days, and you'll see it kind of makes sense, So, and he believes that Dion Jordan will be traded soon, possibly at the draft. Go ahead.
I don't think it'll happen anytime until during the draft, just simply because if it's a trade, I'd imagine that if it's Miami trading him, it's going to involve somebody that's being targeted in the draft, and so it'd be a situation where he's on the board, let's make the trade now. So it wouldn't happen till then. The thing two things that stick out. One is obviously you're talking about the fundamentals of the contract. Can you trade him? But it's not a great time in terms of value because one, he hasn't shown a lot. So I don't know if anybody's going to give up a whole lot just for his potential. And two is he's had those 2 failed drug tests, and so he's 1 strike away from a full season ban. And that makes him very, very risky for a team to invest much draft picks into him because, he just has to do a stupid thing one time, like smoke marijuana or whatever he's could get busted for, and then suddenly he's gone for the year. So that makes it a little risky to rely on the guy as well. I think the final factor in Dion Jordan is it really comes down to Olivier Vernon. And so if they are going to get an extension done with Olivier Vernon and keep him in Miami another 4 years or so, I think absolutely Dion Jordan will get traded. If they're not going to keep Olivier Vernon, then Dion Jordan makes, I don't know where they're going to go out and get a better replacement than Dion Jordan for the money. So to me, that kind of all breaks down into there. But my final word is I think he could play some outside linebacker, but you have to change his body. I think he has to be a little bit lighter. And he would have to work on it immediately in camp and keep him there. I don't think they're going to be able to play him back and forth between end and linebacker. And so it'd be a pretty big time investment too. And I think it'll ultimately get decided after the draft. And if Miami picks up some good linebackers in the draft, I don't think they'll move Dion Jordan to linebacker. But if they're unable to do it and Koa Misi looks like the guy they're going to keep in the middle, I think there's a real good chance that they will move Dion Jordan back out to linebacker. So that's my thoughts.
I don't know, man. I've been saying that I wanted Dion Jordan at linebacker for about ever since like a season and a half ago. I know that at defensive end he's not going to beat out Olivier Vernon. He's not going to spell Cameron Wake because Derek Shelby is going to be ahead of him on the depth chart, and he's honestly a better pass rusher than Jordan is. You look at Dion Jordan and you think this was the guy that Jason Taylor said he reminds me of me. Jason Taylor said that he saw a lot of him in Dion Jordan, and maybe at one point that was the truth. But we picked him in a year where our defensive line was already stacked to the brim. So he couldn't beat out anybody, A, because Coyle's defense is not friendly to rookies, and B, because the other guys ahead of him were just better than him. He made impact plays when he was on the field, yes, but he wasn't as solid. He would flash once or twice, and then he would just disappear for another half of the game, as opposed to someone like Shelby, who was solid all the way through. He didn't do anything spectacular, but he didn't mess up too badly either. I still remember that one game where Dion Jordan went in for the sack against Andrew Luck. Then apparently for some reason he decided to slow up, and he wound up just bouncing off of Luck, and Luck took off running like a shot. That was just embarrassing, and I'm sure he was embarrassed after that game was over, because if you are a pass rusher and your one job is to tackle the quarterback, just bouncing off of Andrew Luck.
You have one job.
Yeah. You have one job, knock down the quarterback, and he bounces off of Andrew Luck. That's just unacceptable. So maybe that's why they decided to bulk him up, so that wouldn't happen anymore. But if by doing so, they removed some of his capabilities in covering tight ends. Mind you, even now, he still did a pretty good job. He was able to cover Calvin Johnson decently in the end zone. He managed to make one game-saving play before Stafford wound up I don't remember the guy's name. I think it was Joik Bell that he wound up throwing the ball to in the end zone for a touchdown that won the game. But before that, it was Dion Jordan on Megatron of all people, and he did a decent job with it. So to say that he just can't do it, it doesn't hold water for me. He can do it. He just hasn't had enough time to actually practice it. To have a guy who's a hybrid guy like that, a man with no position, you have trouble finding him a spot on the field because you have all of these other guys who already do have set positions. You know where Jelani Jenkins is going to play. You knew where Philip Wheeler was going to play, whether we liked it or not, but he had a position, and that was his position. You knew where Misi was going to be. You knew where Shelby was going to be. You knew where all these guys are going to be. We still don't know what we're going to do with Dion Jordan. Dion Jordan can play defensive end decently. Dion Jordan can play outside linebacker, but we have not yet decided what exactly it is we want to do with him. If it's me, I'm making him an outside linebacker to take advantage of his ability in coverage, because not many players can say that they've been able to cover Gronk. I get it. It was one game, and he did it one time, but he still did it, and not a whole lot of people can say that. With the thing with Dion Jordan that makes him so unique is that he's fast enough to cover some of these guys, or at least maybe he was and not anymore thanks to the bulk up. And he's also powerful enough to knock them down afterwards. That's what made him effective against Gronkowski. With Rob Gronkowski, either you're getting outrun because you're a linebacker, or you're getting knocked over because you're a safety. You always had like one or two guys on top of him before Gronk would even slow down. Jordan was able to stop him for at least a little while. So as an outside linebacker, I think that's where his value is, as a defensive weapon who he can use to cover tight ends like that, because he's such a physical specimen that we don't have anybody else on the team that can stop someone like that. McCain is probably better off right now because we have a pretty good idea of what his position actually is, and he would probably be ahead of Jordan as an outside linebacker. But McCain is not as gifted in coverage as Jordan is. That's the only thing that's keeping me wanting Jordan at outside linebacker, is his ability in coverage.
Kathy, what's your opinion on Dion Jordan? I know you always offer a unique perspective on ththings.
Honestly, I'm so over this discussion. I've
All right, time to move on. Next.
Yeah, it's just been confusing since day one. I'd rather see him at offensive linebacker position or outside linebacker position, but what the Dolphins are going to do what the Dolphins are going to do. They think they know what's best, so be it.
Yeah, I mean, we are all talking about his play on the field and his production or lack of production and whatnot, but there's obviously something going on behind the scenes. There has to be. I mean, he's already failed 2 drug tests. His work ethic's been questioned. His security's been questioned. I've heard things that I'm not going to talk about them on the air. It just seems like one thing after another with Dion Jordan, and then I got into it with someone on Twitter. They unfollowed me because he didn't like the way I was refuting his answers and whatnot. Who cares? But I had tagged a few former players in it, and Sam Madison replied back today. and said, yes, you do need to be smart to play the linebacker position. Yes, you do need to have your reads. Yes, you do need to adjust when you see the offensive fronts line up. And I really, really think that Dion Jordan is not smart enough to play in Kevin Quayle's defensive scheme. I really think that's it, and I think that's what it comes down to.
I've seen talks about trading Dion Jordan, and all I can think of is somewhere he's going to wind up going someplace like New England or one of those other places, and he's going to wind up being a star, just like a lot of other players have done. It's not that Jordan isn't talented. Whether Miami is just a bad fit for him, if that really is the case, then I guess we're just going to have to face the Welker syndrome all over again. But Jordan's issue is not lack of talent. He's a man without a position, and if we just find him a position and just make him focus on that one position, specifically outside linebacker, because I really do feel that Jordan's issue is not his smarts. Maybe it is his work ethic, but I don't think he's just that dumb. But, I mean, come on, man. If it's physical ability you're looking for, and if he can, you can't cover Gronk and not have some idea of what you're doing. So we're gonna assume that it was all by accident. I mean, come on, man. You don't cover Calvin Johnson and Rob Gronkowski by accident.
He's a football player. He's not stupid, but Kevin Coyle's schemes are complex, and
they're simplifying it this year, right?
That leads us into the next topic of discussion. Yes, they are simplifying it, and that's one of the biggest things to come out of the league meetings that no one's really talking about it, and I don't know why. A lot of veterans have said during the past season that Coyle's schemes are very complex for them to even pick up and adjust to during the game, never mind a rookie or a new guy coming from a different team coming in to adjust and learn the scheme. So Joe Philbin, when he was deciding whether or not to fire Kevin Coyle, told Coyle, I'm going to keep you, but you need to simplify your schemes. You need to have less packages. You need to do less rotation when it's possible. And you need to get these guys on the field and stop thinking and start reacting. And hopefully that helps with Dion Jordan if he's not traded. Okay? Hopefully that helps everyone else on the defense, which I'm sure it's going to. And hopefully that gets this defense playing at a high level. I mean, they've already been sort of playing at a high level. I know they had the drop at the end of last season. But before that, they were playing great. The year before that, they were playing great before a little slide at the end. You know, it's just they need to start reacting on the field instead of thinking. And Coyle's infamous for his very complex schemes, and it looks like that's going to change. And like I said, a lot of people are just throwing that under the rug, but it's going to be a huge part of this offseason.
If they can simplify the offense and make it easier for guys like Chris McCain and all these other players that we want on the field to actually get on the field, there's going to be a big improvement. And once again, we seem to, ever since the signing happened, we seem to have glossed over this as almost like it didn't happen. Like, okay, what's next? I mean, we still managed to make the biggest signing of the whole offseason, guys. We signed Ndamukong Suh, the best defensive tackle in the NFL. And I don't even know if can't think of any names out there that you could even debate are better defensive tackles than Ndamukong Suh. So just having him there, crashing the middle of the line, and pairing him with Wake and Vernon, who, by the way, are still going to do what they do regardless of who is the defensive tackle, that's going to make everything is going to become easier, because suddenly there's going to be pressure on the quarterback pretty much every single play. This is not Ndamukong Suh, and as much as I love Jared Odrick is nowhere near the talent level that Ndamukong Suh is. And neither is Randy Starks, neither is Earl Mitchell, and just having Suh there, paired up with whoever defensive tackle we decide to put him there, whether it's A.J. Francis, Anthony Johnson, or if Earl Mitchell manages to keep his job, you look at that defensive line, and suddenly everything for the rest of the defense becomes easier. We know about Jelani Jenkins. We already know what he can do. We already know what he can do with the old defensive line. Suh makes him better. We knew what Koa Misi can do when he's healthy. Suddenly he's going to be better because he has Suh there. The secondary is going to be better because the quarterbacks are going to be forced to make bad throws because they're going to have to get the ball out of there before they get knocked to the ground. So that's going to make things better for Brent Grimes, Jamar Taylor, assuming he gets the job. It's going to make things easier for Rashad Jones. It's going to make things easier for Louis Delmas. It's going to make things easier for everybody. Everybody. and we seem to be ignoring this. I understand that we have holes, there are places we could upgrade, but even if we stood pat and said that we're going to have Koa Misi as the middle linebacker, we're going to put somebody, I don't even know who yet right now at the strong side linebacker spot. I don't know who it would be yet, but you still get Rashad Jones, you still got Louis Delmas. You got Jamar Taylor, who's very talented. I get that he's injury prone, but his issue is not talent. If he stays healthy, we have our number 2 cornerback. Grimes is going to be Grimes, and in fact, he might be better. He might be really good again because Ndamukong Suh. That signing is going to make a bigger impact than anybody is giving credit for. He's getting a lot of money because he is the best in the NFL. There is no question about that.
Chad, what do you got on this? Simplifying the scheme and everything else.
It's hard for me to answer without knowing what that means, simplifying the scheme. I thought it was literally the most apparent thing last year was lack of talent at linebacker, particularly as the season went on and we had injuries. And I thought that our defensive tackle play was not where it needed to be. And obviously, Ndamukong Suh will help that. I still feel pretty strongly we need an upgrade at inside linebacker. I thought Koa Misi did okay when he was healthy, but he has had history staying on the field for 16 games, and other than Koa Misi, I don't think we have anybody on the team I think that can play inside linebacker sufficiently. I never thought Jason Trusnick had the talent to do it. I was surprised we even re-signed Calvin Shepard. That the limited time I saw him on field, he didn't look like he had very good tackling fundamentals to me. He wasn't that impressive. And I'm hoping right now that the plan in this draft is to get a solid inside linebacker, and that running game then will be solved, and that will make the defense all around everything changes because the schemes will change for Coyle. So I kind of leave it at that. Simplifying it to me is just kind of window dressing that doesn't really mean anything because you don't really know what was complex, what wasn't complex, were people really having trouble picking up on it, and that sort of thing. So that's really all I can say.
It's certainly going to be interesting to see, how the defense reacts and whatnot. And just, I know you guys have been talking about the different linebacker possibilities. Chad, you mentioned Eric Kendricks, who I'm a big fan of. The Dolphins, Joe Philbin said that Koa Misi is the inside linebacker for now, which means they were obviously looking to replace him and move him back to the outside. News on Twitter coming out Thursday evening-ish said that Mason Foster told Alex Marvez of SiriusXM Radio that the Dolphins were trying to sign him and were the runners-up in trying to sign him. So obviously the Dolphins are targeting a middle linebacker. Who knows if they like someone in the draft or not? Who knows if they try to pull off a trade for one of them? Who knows if they just stick with Koa Misi right in the middle for another season? They were very rumored, a lot of rumors going around. They were targeting a linebacker last year in the first round with Ryan Shazier and C.J. Mosley as their top 2 targets, and of course neither of them got to them. So if you're looking at a linebacker this year in the first round, you're looking at Eric Kendricks, who I'm in love with. And then in the second round, you're looking at someone like Denzel Perryman, who is a solid player, but he's very, very poor in coverage. So they're thinking about getting a linebacker who can cover and do everything.
I wouldn't say he's that bad. He's just not. He just doesn't have those measurables that everybody wants. Kind of reminds you of Zach Thomas.
Okay. But I don't think he's, you're right, but I don't think he's going to do much better in the NFL in terms of coverage because the guys are faster, stronger, and whatnot. But we'll see. Who knows?
Okay, that's fine. It's instincts, though. Instincts are like the most important thing for middle linebacker.
Who knows? We'll see. In our live chat, I'm seeing Paul Dawson and Jeff Hyde throwing that out. Jeff Hyde, a contributor to PhinManiacs. Paul Dawson is a very good linebacker. He had he had a poor combine. A lot of scouts sort of questioning his work ethic and his slow times and whatnot. And Paul Dawson coming out afterwards and saying that he's not a track star, he's a football player. So Paul Dawson's another one I know. I know that Dawson's a huge fan favorite, a favorite of Jeff Hyde, who's working very hard on our draft publication and getting these prospect scouting reports in there. So I guess Paul Dawson is an option as well. I forgot about him. The Dolphins can go in a lot of different directions in the draft with what positions they want to attack. But we'll see. But I do think they'll be drafting a middle linebacker or looking to draft one in the early rounds of the upcoming draft.
There are 3 good middle linebackers in the draft, and there's a ton of wide receivers that are just waiting to go in the second round. If I'm the Dolphins, I'm drafting Eric Kendricks in the first round, and then in the second round I'm going for a Jalen Strong or Nelson Aguilar or one of those guys that can get yards after the catch. I'm liking Strong a lot, but a lot of people are saying Aguilar, and you know what? I'd be just fine with either one of those guys. There's a lot more depth at wide receiver than there is at linebacker, so if we really want a good linebacker, then that's the first one we go with.
And if all else fails, they'll just ask Zach Thomas to come back out of retirement, and everything will be set, and everything will be ready.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to debate that for sure. Zach Thomas is Zach Thomas. I will not argue.
They'll have a successful season.
He's better at 40-something than a lot of linebackers in the NFL now.
Of course, you got Jelani Jenkins on the outside as well coming back. Moving on to the offensive side of the ball with the offensive line, I know a lot of fans are getting upset about this, and I don't know why. Even beat reporters are getting upset about this, and again, I don't know why. It's draft season, it's smokescreen season, and you hear Joe Philbin, Mike Tannenbaum, Dennis Hickey talking about how they're looking to upgrade every single position except offensive guard. How does that make sense? Especially with
it doesn't.
Is Dallas Thomas the new Daniel Thomas? Is Dallas Thomas the new? These 4 other guys that have stuck around forever, it seems, before finally getting cut. The Dolphins are not going to go into the season with Dallas Thomas and Billy Turner. And if I'm wrong, come back to this podcast. I'll pay you guys some money, 50 cents, 25 cents, maybe 5 cents. Maybe 5 cents if I'm feeling generous. Come on, guys. It's draft season. It's smokescreen season. Everything the Dolphins are saying about offensive guard leads me to believe they're either looking to trade for one, they're looking to draft one early, they're looking to sign one in free agency after the draft to see how it all shakes out. They're going to be crazy to go into training camp with Dallas Thomas as their starting offensive guard. He had all of last training camp to prove himself, and he failed miserably. Remember the game against the Atlanta Falcons? Oh, my God. Dallas Thomas, relax, guys. Just relax.
You sound like Aaron Rodgers now.
I wish I could play like Aaron Rodgers.
Just relax. It's all good. Yeah, okay.
But that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Dallas Thomas, man. I don't know how this guy has managed to survive this long. I guess it's just kind of like the Pat Devlin syndrome when he just stuck around because Philbin liked him. But, I mean, how many times does a guy have to fail before enough is enough? We've seen him get trashed at right tackle, and I don't know why he got to play over Jason Fox, even though Jason Fox was clearly better. And oh, guess what? He's back now, so I guess that's a lesson learned. He was not good at guard. So again, why is he there? He's just a body to stick in there because someone else has to be hurt. Nate Garner was hurt for the majority of the year last year, so I guess that's why they went to Dallas Thomas, because Gardner was down. If that's the case, then I'm just shaking my head wondering, why didn't we do something else about this? Of course, I'm going to be totally honest with this. Darren College was also down. Nate Garner was down, so I guess they really were down in their last resort. Of course, that doesn't excuse why he was playing over Fox, but I'm not going to try and figure that logic out because I don't think there is any logic. As for Billy Turner, I'm perfectly fine with Billy Turner. He's a mauler in the run-blocking game. All he needs to do is work on his technique in the pass blocking, and we're good to go at that spot. It really just does come down to that last guard spot that supposedly has Dallas Thomas plugged into it right now, and that just – I'm sure you're right about it being a smokescreen, and I'm sure they're going to bring in somebody. I don't know who yet, whether it's a draft pick or it's a veteran guard, or maybe – the Eagles finally make good on releasing Evan Mathis, and the Dolphins can jump on him. If they do that, then we'll have a really good offensive line, and we'll be set to go for the year. Because Evan Mathis, despite being 34 years old, has been the top zone blocking guard in the NFL for the past 5 years, and that doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. So I'm not going to complain if I just had a brain fart. Okay, the guy from Evan Mathis. Yes, Evan Mathis. Thank you, Tony, on the chat. I appreciate that. I mean, look, man. Dallas Thomas is not going to be acceptable. There's just no getting around that. I'm sure that they'll come up with something, but if we're trying to fake anybody out, I don't see how anybody's going to fall for it because, truth be told, nobody is going to think, even the people who don't like us, nobody's going to think that we are dumb enough to stick with Dallas Thomas as our starting left guard. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
I like I said, I agree with you. Kathy, your thoughts on the offensive line with Dallas Thomas? I know Dallas Thomas is your boy, right?
You're funny. No, not a fan of Dallas Thomas at all. I have no idea why he was starting over Fox, like Lewis said. And I agree with Lewis. I'm fine with Billy Turner. You know, we just need to figure out something with Dallas Thomas because right now that's not okay.
Dallas Thomas is probably playing the Nate Garner role of things, just the guy who can play everywhere and just well, he can play everywhere, but he can. We make this joke all the time, and I'm going to make it again because it's still appropriate. Dallas Thomas is very versatile. He can give up a sack anywhere on the offensive line, and it's true. He's not going to be good no matter where you stick him. Even if you started playing him at center, he would still get beat down by all these defensive tackles. Gerald McCoy made him look like a fool, and if he winds up being a left guard, well, guess who's going to make a fool out of him all over again? And Ndamukong Suh. You're going to be facing the best defensive tackle in the NFL in practice every day for the next month or so, and either you're going to get really good really fast because you're tired of being on your behind, or you're going to get replaced. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, I can't say anything real good about Dallas Thomas. I do think he's a better guard than he is a tackle. I can say that for him. But I'm with Matt. I think people just need to be patient. I don't think there's any way that Miami is planning on going into the season with just Sam Brenner and Dallas Thomas as their right guard competition. They've got a plan. Whether or not that's the draft or not, I suspect you already hit it on the head, Lewis. I think they're waiting to see if the Eagles are going to release Mathis, and I think the Eagles are going to release him now. The other question, though, that's highly questionable is Miami going to get him if they do. So I'm pretty sure they're going to sign later on in free agency, probably to a short-term deal, a veteran guard to come in and compete. I just don't think they're going to do anything until the draft is over because, if they draft a guard in the first 2 rounds, then, that's going to change their plan on what they would do with a veteran. So it makes all the sense in the world just to wait, and I would be very, very surprised if Dallas Thomas was what they planned to have starting at guard going into this season.
Yeah, well, if he is, then he's going to be exposed real quick. So whatever, he'll have to be moved over eventually.
The consensus with all of us is that it's all a smokescreen, and I believe it's a smokescreen, and we'll see. We'll see pretty soon. Even if they don't draft a guard in the draft, you never know what happens after the draft. There's a lot of people that get cut, a lot of surprises. Well, not a lot of surprises, some surprises. Like I said, Evan Mathis is still in play for the Miami Dolphins if he is, in fact, cut by the Philadelphia Eagles, whether before the draft, after the draft, whatnot. We'll keep an eye on it.
It's Dallas Thomas, man. Is that really hard to figure out?
Yeah, he's a great player. Next up on the docket is the public contradiction between, and they of course they didn't plan it. They didn't know they were going to be asked about it on separate days. But earlier this week, Stephen Ross, when asked about Ryan Tannehill, said they're working on a long-term extension with him. Said that we love everything that Ryan is doing, but there's one thing that he hasn't proven himself on, and that's his ability to connect on the deep ball. Okay. And, of course, Twitter went crazy with this. All the Tannehill haters were in their freaking glory, jumping up and down, throwing popcorn in the air, running around outside, banging pots and pans like it's New Year's Eve, blowing the party horns, popping the champagne bottles, and just dishing it out left and right all over the place. And then the next day, Joel Philbin comes out and says it's not all on Tannehill. And then all the Tannehill haters slowly went back into their shell, and all the Tannehill supporters came out throwing their confetti and popcorn in the air, banging pots and pans outside like it's New Year's Eve, popping their champagne bottles, jumping all around, throwing it out, dishing it out. Oh, it's not Tannehill's fault. It's this guy's fault, that guy's fault. Miko Grimes is over there swearing at all the other fans and everything else going on. And oh, man, it was just a fun few days for Dolphins Twitter, just overreacting on everything. I don't see a huge problem with it. To an extent, I know the PFF stats, Pro Football Focus stats, will paint a different picture, but the perception is, wrong or right, that Tannehill cannot connect on the deep ball. When you talk to a coach, then you realize everything else that goes on, the protection on the line, the inability for players to track the ball in the air, maybe too much of a touch here, too little of a touch there. so many variables, so many factors to go into throwing a pass to running a play, whether it's 25 yards down the field or 2 yards down the field. There's just so many factors coming into play. Kathy, I know you're a big supporter of Ryan Tannehill. What do you make of the comments between the owner and the head coach?
It's driving me crazy. But I'm actually on Philbin's side. I mean, obviously, like you said, there's so many variables. How can you pin it on Tannehill himself? Yeah, there's been a few, drop passes. There's been a few times that he was off target. But that's football. That's most quarterbacks. So why are we giving Tannehill a hard time with this? I don't understand.
Because it's a magical QB world, and as long as Tannehill has a quarterback rating under 100, obviously he sucks, and we need to move on to somebody else like Jameis Winston.
No,
that's how it works.
You're right.
That's how
it. Tim Tebow is still out there, right, Chad?
Say that one more time, Matt. What'd you say?
I said Tim Tebow's still out there, right, Chad?
Oh, Tim Tebow. No, I'll definitely say I'm not promoting Tim Tebow to be the starting quarterback. I was suggesting him as an affordable backup, but now that we re-signed Moore, I don't think I would sign Tim Tebow. No.
No, we don't need Tebow. We got Matt Moore, and those are them. Guys, I had this conversation with somebody on the Phinsiders chat, and guys, I had to leave. I was getting ready to rage all over everybody because this man got up there with a straight face and said that Matt Moore was a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill, like sincerely, honestly believing this. And I'm thinking to myself, you serious? 27 touchdowns, over 4,000 yards, only 12 interceptions, and you are trying to tell me that Matt Moore is still far better than Tannehill as a quarterback. And all I can think to myself is, what? Explain yourself. Prove this to me. Explain why you feel that Matt Moore is a better quarterback, and all he could think of was QB rating. And I just wanted to rip my hair out right then and there because I have run into so many QB rating drones these past few days.
Wasn't Omar Kelly in the Phinsiders chat with you?
No, I'm sure it wasn't Omar. Omar was on the show earlier today, and he pretty much went on. He said that he said the same thing, that Tannehill can't put air under the ball, and so he can't throw the deep ball, and that's why they're making the offense to fit him. It's like, okay, fine. Tannehill's not great at throwing the deep ball, but stop saying he can't do it. He's done it. He just hasn't done it with Wallace. He's done it all. He did it with Hartline a bunch of times. He did it with Clay. He did it with Matthews. He did it with Williams. And if they drop the football and it goes right through their hands, you cannot pin that on Ryan Tannehill no matter how hard you try. You can look at the box score and say, oh, well, he did this, he missed this many passes, and so this must be the reason. No, it doesn't work that way. Let me educate everybody once again on exactly what it is that makes QB rating so wrong. QB rating does not take into account dropped passes, batted interceptions. It does not take into account the offensive line's failures to protect their quarterback. It does not take into account many different factors that have a huge impact on how the game goes. If Tannehill hits his guy in the chest and it bounces up into the air and it gets picked off by a New York Jet like it did with Lamar Miller, QB rating is going to tell you that that was all Tannehill's fault. How? It hit him right in the chest. There was nothing else he could have done to make the ball any easier for him to catch. It wasn't his fault. But QB rating will tell you, yes, it was. And the same thing goes for the deep ball. If Rishard Matthews catches that pass and runs into the end zone for a touchdown, that's a huge boost to Tannehill's QB rating. If Damian Williams doesn't drop that pass in the end zone, that's another big boost to his QB rating. It's the same thing all the time. He can do it, but people act like he can't. So the narrative is, what is that? What is that music?
That's your cue to shut up.
Oh, terrific.
No,
I wasn't done yet.
I'm just kidding. You were going off on a little rant there. Rein yourself back in. Continue on.
I wasn't done yet. No, you already threw me off. But whatever. The point's been made. This QB rating thing, this whole deep ball narrative, they want so badly to say that this is the reason why Tannehill cannot be a franchise quarterback. But all I have to do is repeat myself what I said right after the Super Bowl all over again. 40 out of 51 of Tom Brady's passes traveled less than 10 yards, and they won the Super Bowl with that. If Brady can do it and be praised for it, Tannehill should not get trashed because he plays the exact same style of football.
Chad, chime in. What are your thoughts on this whole situation?
Well, Stephen Ross is known for saying things that I think are more popular opinion than actual knowing what's going on the field. So I don't put a lot of concern into what Ross says when it comes to football. I mean, he just kind of goes with the crowd. He's kind of more of a fan than he is an analyst or anything. Philbin, I think Philbin's right. I mean, obviously there was protection problems this year, particularly in the middle of the field, and it's hard to throw deep balls when you're under a lot of duress because you got to hold the ball longer, and a lot of times you have to change your throwing motion when there's somebody on you, and so that definitely contributed to difficulty in the deep ball. And Lewis made the point that I think is actually the most important is the only person that Tannehill has thrown a significant number of deep balls to is Mike Wallace. And watching Mike Wallace run routes, I don't think Mike Wallace runs routes very consistently. I think he's so fast that it's difficult to get a timing down with Mike Wallace. I think he blows down the field so fast sometimes that it's hard. And I've been saying from the whole time when this has become a topic that the issue Ryan Tannehill has not had is his arm strength. It's understanding when to get the ball up in the air. And I think that's hard to get down when Mike Wallace is running routes at different speeds at different times. And so I think you've made this point too, Lewis. We talked about how hard Mike Wallace worked on the jugs machine all the time, but was he putting in a ton of time with Mike Wallace? They should have been best friends playing catch continuously, running routes and getting their timings down. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how well Ryan Tannehill throws a deep ball with some different receivers. And, just even though this is a very small sample size, he didn't look like he was having trouble hitting deep balls to Damian Williams in the preseason. Even though he got cut, there was another guy running vertical routes, and Tannehill was hitting him just fine. So it's to me, it's a topic that's still up in the air, and it's way over talked about right now. And if you've been watching the Miami Dolphins ever since Dan Marino retired, I mean you're bordering on ludicrous to me if you're trying to politic that you need to get Ryan Tannehill gone. It's just so difficult to get good quarterbacks in the NFL. And Ryan Tannehill, considering he only played quarterback really 1 year in college, and he's been thrown in there as a rookie, he's never had a good line. So I think give him a chance this year. He's going to have a taller player in Jordan Cameron, and just keep calm and carry on. That's what I would say with Ryan Tannehill.
And I'm not gonna stand here and say that Tannehill's good at the deep ball, mind you. I'm not saying that at all. He's just not terrible like people have been trying to say he is. We had an interesting conversation with Steve Palazzolo of Pro Football Focus, and he pretty much confirmed for us with his number crunching.
Look at Lewis with the name drops.
Well, you want to find it on Twitter? It's there. Go find it.
I'm not disputing it.
I know. It's like if anybody needs proof, you can go find it on his Twitter feed. The conversation's there. We had the discussion. Tannehill's numbers throwing deep are way better when he throws it to somebody whose name is not Mike Wallace. So whether it was chemistry, whether it was because Wallace could not run the routes, whether it was because he couldn't track the football, or whether it was because Tannehill kept trying to aim the football, which is sometimes it seems to be a legitimate concern. And I'm not going to say that he doesn't make that mistake. I'm not saying Tannehill's perfect, but to sit here and say that Tannehill is terrible at the deep ball is just wrong, because it doesn't have to just be Wallace running super fast and getting down the field. Other people can make that catch too. We saw other people make that catch. Clay made that catch a couple of times. And that one game, he threw a whole bunch of deep balls, and it got dropped 3/4 of the time. So imagine what would have happened if those balls had been caught. We would have been having a completely different narrative. Like, why don't we throw the deep ball to other players more? That would have been the narrative. But instead, since they were dropped, it wound up becoming Tannehill can't throw the deep ball still.
Yeah, we know it's just a fan's perception that just look at the ball and just look at the tape. Kathy, Do you have any last words on Tannehill before we move on to the next subject?
Yeah, I think it's a common misconception that either you think Tannehill's really good at the deep ball or really bad at the deep ball, like Lewis was saying. You can still support Tannehill and think that he's not perfect at it, but he's improving, and I'm excited to see what he has this season.
I think Tannehill will continue to take that next step in year 4 under another year with Bill Lazor, and he has all the tools, like Stephen Ross said, to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Top 10, I believe he will be after year 4, and we'll just have to see what kind of steps he takes. And, of course, with the new receiving core, with Jordan Cameron, as long as he stays healthy, Dolphins could be in business for their offense. Moving on, back to the defensive side of the ball, the Dolphins made another key signing, Louis Delmas, returning to the secondary. Lewis, I know you've met Delmas in person before. You've talked to him in person. You've sat with him in person. You drank soda together. You smiled at him. You took a picture of him. You gave him a high five.
Oh my God!
You showed him pictures on your phone. I mean, I don't mean it like that.
You're making it sound like that.
Pictures of your family and stuff like that. You guys have become best friends, basically. Okay. Tell us about Delmas. How important is this re-signing for the Dolphins?
It's a pretty big deal, man, and I'm not even just saying that because I like the guy. It's because our buddy C.K. Parrott, again, Chris Kaufman, he put up some very interesting numbers about what would happen, what the difference was in the defense when Delmas was not on the field. There was a big difference in the point differential per 60 minutes. The defense, they gave up almost double the amount of points for when Delmas was not on the field than when Delmas was on the field, and that's a pretty significant number. Delmas provides leadership that is much needed on the defense, and I mean, he's better than a lot of people give him credit for. People see these injury-prone players, and I will admit that Delmas is injury-prone, but they're trying to basically paint it like, oh, we knew it was going to happen. He was going to get hurt eventually. He made it all the way to Week 16. It's not like he got hurt in the middle of the season like Branden Albert did, guys. He almost made it all the way through the season. If he had gotten hurt on the last game of the season, they probably still would have made it. But you want to talk about injury-prone players, then maybe we can talk about Knowshon Moreno. Okay, he got hurt in the middle of the season. Fine, I understand the concern. You want to talk about Branden Albert. Okay, fine. He got hurt. I get it. Middle of the season, it hurts a lot. Delmas almost made it through the season. So I pretty much count that as he made it. He made it through the season as far as I'm concerned. The team had pretty much given up already, and if he got hurt then, he got hurt then. He made it through the season. Week 16, to me, is pretty much the season because the playoffs are already out of reach as it was, and he still provides a lot of really good leadership, and I'm really glad to have him back because this team needs some veteran leadership still.
In terms of Louis Delmas, I think you're right, Louis. One player people are really talking about is Walt Aikens, and he has a ton of talent, and he's got a good body build to play safety. And so,
well, yeah.
I think the Dolphins are comfortable with Walt Aikens, and so it made all the sense in the world to bring Louis Delmas back because even if he's not ready to go 100%, the first game or two, I think they're fine putting Walt Aikens in there, and they're more worried about pairing him with another safety that can help him develop. And Louis Delmas is a great fit for that. And so as I got further along and I started to watch more tape of the little Walt Aikens played and watch just some of his college film and stuff to see how talented he is, I don't think safety was a critical need for Miami in terms of having to go out and pay big dollars or pay a high draft pick to get one. I think bringing Louis Delmas back was a great move.
Well, Chad, Aikens was a cornerback that they transitioned to safety. Didn't he play corner in college?
In college he did, yes, but he's not like a small guy. He's not like one of their typical coil corners that's like 5'8" and $190. He's a big guy and he can run and he can jump. And so I think he'll be able to transition to that safety spot just fine.
I'm not arguing. I was just talking because you brought up his college tape, and I'm like, his college tape is at corner, not safety.
What I was watching was just how big and fast he was, is what I was getting at. And so he definitely has the talent to play the position. And so it occurred to me that I could easily see 2 to 3 years down the road him being a starting caliber safety in the league. And if they feel that same way, there's no sense in putting a high draft pick or a high-priced free agent when you can just bring Luis Delmas back. They'll be fine, in my opinion.
Don't forget about Michael Thomas too in the secondary. Someone mentioned it in the live chat.
Mm-hmm.
Dolphins are good. In the secondary, they got some depth. They got some young players stepping up. If Delmas can stay healthy, his agent Drew Rosenhaus said that he's back on track to get there in time for mini camps in June. If everything works out and Delmas stays healthy, remember he was healthy for the vast majority of the season. Went down, I think, what was it, week 15? I want to say.
I think it was week 16.
Week 15 or week 16? I think it was week 15. He in a freak ACL injury, he didn't even touch anybody. Just went down. So hopefully he can stay healthy. The defense really slid after he left for those final few games, and the communication was lacking a lot in those final times of the season. Moving on to another person that the Dolphins are really counting on to come back from injuries, Branden Albert, who suffered that really gruesome ACL and MCL tear in the game against the Detroit Lions. He is slated to come back. He's been working really hard. We've seen all the posts on Twitter, Instagram, and whatnot. Is he going to be ready for the start of the season, and how much of an impact does he make on the team, Kathy?
Well, he's giving me the impression that he will be back for the start of the season, and I hope he's right because he makes a big difference on our team. I mean, he brought the protect the hill to our team, and that's exactly what he did. So as long as he can stay healthy, I think he can keep Tannehill upright.
Now, in terms of if he's not healthy, should the Dolphins, in your opinion, Kathy, should the Dolphins move Juwan James back over to left tackle, or should they look at the draft, early rounds draft, someone like Lael Collins in the first round, so they could put him at left tackle for the first few games, then move him back to left guard when Branden Albert returns, or should they just slide James over and have someone fill in as a stopgap for James for the first few games of the year?
Honestly, I think I would go to the draft. I mean, I'm okay with James, but I don't feel as confident. I think we have better chances going to the draft for that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people tend to agree with you. I know I agree with you there. Chad, I know you've looked a lot at the offensive line play. And, what are your thoughts on where the Dolphins stand if Branden Albert isn't ready to come back week 1, or if he is ready to come back week 1?
Well, I feel a lot better when they re-signed Jason Fox because at least he can play at a competency level. He's by no means going to be a dominant Pro Bowl tackle, but I think Jason Fox is fully capable of playing left tackle or right tackle if need be. My preference from what I've seen is I'd rather see Jason Fox play left tackle and just keep Juwan James at right tackle, but either or they're okay. I'd love to get one in the draft, but it's just tackle is such a premium position. Either you got to pay a lot of money in free agency, or if you really want to get a rookie that is actually going to be able to start as a rookie in the NFL, he's going to have to be a pretty high pick. And I just think there's so many other needs they have to fill. Like they could definitely use another solid cornerback. We've touched that they need a middle linebacker. They could use a running back. They can use a receiver. And those are just all needs I would put ahead of offensive tackle, assuming that Branden Albert's going to be able to return, within the first couple games of the year to form. So to me, that's what it's really about is not only will he be back, what level is he going to be playing at when he is back. So there's a lot riding on him.
Well, I'm not going to say that running back is a need, but it'd be a luxury pick, and that's why I've been saying that veterans. I'd rather have a veteran running back just to pay him a vet minimum rather than spend a draft pick on a running back, considering we don't have that many draft picks. We only have 6 draft picks now as it is, and I understand where people are coming from when they say they want to draft somebody to play left tackle, but that just tells me that what's going to happen if Albert's not ready to go in training camp, and we spend all this time with our rookie playing at left tackle, and then when Albert does come back, we can't just bench the guy, so we're going to have to bump our left tackle over to left guard, and he hasn't had any time to practice there. So if we're going to draft somebody who can play tackle, I would rather still have this mentality that he's going to be playing left guard and just let either Juwan James or Jason Fox play left tackle, because I don't want a rookie to come in, play left tackle all through training camp, and then as soon as Albert comes back, which he will, you're going to have to bump him over to you're going to have to bump him over to left guard, which he hasn't done any practice with the whole way through. That's the kind of mentality I'm having with it. There are plenty of other guards that we can take in the later rounds. And let's be honest here, guys. Albert is going to be around for at least a couple more years. There's time to find a replacement. We don't have to do it right now. So we can move forward with either Jawan James and Jason Fox at left tackle. Albert will be back, if not the first week, then maybe week 3 tops, because this guy's not sitting at home eating donuts all day. He's working his butt off to get back on the football field, and I actually expect him to be ready to go by week 1. A determination can mean a lot to a lot of people, and if Albert goes down again, then you're gonna have to trust in Jawan James, who has done a lot of practice at left tackle ever since Albert went down. It's not like the kid is inexperienced. He was thrown into the fire with no kind of practice. I'm sure during training camp they're going to be spending some time with him right there at left tackle. So he's gonna be able to hold things down for at least a little while. And that's what the emergency money is for veterans, right? We cannot be completely scared that these players are going to go down. You have that kind of mentality, then you're going to constantly be scared out of your mind that this team is going to go down because one player is going to go down. You can't do that, guys. There's never going to be enough money in the world to be able to make so much depth that we're not going to have a downgrade no matter who gets hurt. If Albert gets hurt, yes, it's going to be a downgrade. If we spend a first-round draft pick on a left tackle, then you're going to wind up not having an inside linebacker again. You're going to wind up not having a wide receiver. And no matter what, you will find a way to be upset about the fact that, oh, we shouldn't have drafted this guy, or no, we should have drafted this guy instead. It's always the same thing. I don't want to draft a left tackle with our first-round draft pick. Right now, linebacker and wide receiver is more important to me than drafting Branden Albert's replacement 2 years before it's necessary.
Well, we'll have to see. Obviously, the Dolphins have a lot to think about. With Branden Albert, he signed a 5-year contract, I believe, last year, but I don't think he sees the end of that contract. I hope he stays healthy, but he's had injury concerns his entire career.
Well, I'm not saying that he's going to see the end of his contract, but people want his replacement now. It's only been 1 year.
No, I know, but they need to start thinking about the replacement is what I'm saying. They might have an opportunity to do so this year in the draft. But you're right. It might be a little too early, especially if he's in year 2. He hasn't proven that he could finish the entire season yet. They might give him one more chance. And then,
it was a freak accident. It's not like he got his leg rolled up on, guys. That's not like that wasn't even his fault.
Yeah, I broke.
Anybody's gonna. Yeah, that's not fun.
I was 3, and I'm fine.
Okay, well.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with this, but just wanted to throw that out there for you guys.
Yeah, it's like I have no response to that.
Me either. Anyways, moving on to another guy who suffered a season-ending injury last season was Knowshon Moreno, and a report came out earlier this week, and we posted it on the website that the Dolphins will be interested in bringing back Knowshon Moreno depending on what happens in the draft. The Dolphins are keeping tabs on Moreno and how he's been progressing and whatnot. And who knows? Kathy, would you be open for the Dolphins to bring back Moreno?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not one to judge off of one game, but that game versus New England with almost 150 rushing yards, it was just so electric. And I don't want to throw away the possibility of that being part of our future. I know he's very injury prone, which is scary, so it's a big risk to take, but that game was awesome with him on the field. So I would like to see him come back. If we draft a running back, I don't think he's going to come back. I don't think it's worth it, but if we don't draft one, then I'd love to see him come back.
Knowshon needs to come back on a vet minimum deal.
Lewis, I know you like Knowshon a lot. I hear you
Yes.
talk, whispering in the background, mumbling, jumping up and down, cheering, screaming, throwing tables out the window because you're so excited.
Well, I'm not. Well, you guys.
Why do you love him so much?
he showed fire and he showed physicality that we haven't had on this team since Ricky Williams, guys. It's not that hard to figure out. He smashed through the New England Patriots and made them look like fools. I fall in love with any player who can do that. And, I mean, we know he can do this stuff when he's healthy. And if we're willing to trust it, well, actually, nobody's actually – I take it back. Nobody's willing to trust in Albert. Nobody's willing to trust in Taylor. Nobody's willing to trust in Delmas. Man, we have a lot of trust issues here. We see all this talent, and then we turn around and say, oh, he's going to get hurt, so we need to draft someone else. Hey, guys, sometimes the better options aren't out there. Sometimes you got to take a chance on these guys. I don't even think people are willing to trust Jordan Cameron just yet. So it's like, come on. Gives these guys a break. A lot of these injuries are freak accidents that it's like you've had really bad luck. Albert got his leg rolled up on. Delmas wasn't even touching anybody. Things happen. I know somebody who messed up her whole knee just by walking. Things happen. You got to trust that they're going to come back and be fine again. At some point, you're going to have to stop throwing away talent because you're afraid these guys are going to get injury prone. There isn't always a replacement out there. And even if there are, we may not have the resources to bring in everybody we need.
Chad, do you have anything to chime in with Moreno, or should we move on?
For Moreno, I agree with how he played, the style. I mean, he played like a crazy guy with the way he'd run in there and get those tough yards. And so the way he played when he was healthy last season is the ideal fit for what Miami needs as a back to pair with Lamar Miller for short yardage back, a power runner, those sorts of things. But the thing I'm worried about with Moreno is, I haven't heard anything on where his rehab is, but when he came in this last year when we signed him, he was out of shape. There's no doubt in my mind he was out of shape. And so my question would be is what kind of shape is he in right now? What kind of a condition is his knee in? And I would highly question, is he physically ready to play at the same level he was at the beginning of last season? If he can come in and he can prove, that he's got some pretty good speed yet and he's in pretty good shape, I would definitely consider signing him to a veteran minimum later in free agency. But I just have a feeling that he's not in shape right now. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's working out hard. But when he was healthy, he wasn't in shape. So that's
exactly that's the only argument I was making, guys. I'm not saying that we need to bring him in and we need to give him all this guaranteed money. He's going to be a guy that's going to wind up getting a vet minimum deal because nobody else is going to want to pay him. And if he doesn't cut it in training camp, you cut the guy. We're acting like we're going to bring him in and he's going to be there forever. No, if he doesn't cut it, he doesn't cut it. It's not that big a deal.
I'm not politicking to not sign him, but he would probably be down on my list compared to what other options there might be in the draft or guys that come in good shape and are healthy. Like I said, he has to be in good shape, moving well, and prove that he's ready to go at a high level again. Then, of course, but I haven't heard anything from anyone that suggests that Knowshon Moreno is in great shape and ready to go. So that's really what it boils down to.
If we had all 7 picks, I would be fine with drafting a running back, but we don't. We only have 6, and who knows, we may lose more if Mike Tannenbaum decides he wants to trade up for Amari Cooper or something.
Well, if Gurley's hanging around and we trade back in the first round or you get into the early second round, that could get really interesting.
I'm actually afraid that I'm agreeing with you on this, Lewis. It doesn't happen often, so you're right. They don't. I was just talking in a live chat just a few seconds ago saying that the running back is very deep in the draft. At the same time, I'm thinking there's no way the Dolphins are going to fill all their holes in the draft. They just don't have enough picks unless they start trading down during the draft. But do you want to do that? I think they will look to trade down, maybe in the second round. I don't think they will in the first round, but who knows? We have no idea what Mike Tannenbaum's going to do. The guy is so unpredictable. Rex Ryan even said he was unpredictable. The one thing they did do well, though, I'm not saying they haven't done anything not well. They've done a great job this offseason, but another key re-signing besides Luis Delmas and the talk about possibly bringing back Knowshon Moreno is Matt Moore. Matt Moore just re-signed for about, I think, $2.5 million for a 1-year contract, solidifies the backup quarterback position on the team, gives Ryan Tannehill that familiar face in the meeting room, on the field, on the sideline. I think, it's another low-key signing that is going to pay big dividends again in this offense. What do you guys think about Matt Moore real quick? Lewis.
He's back. He's back again, and he's ready to do the backup thing. He's going to show up. He's going to talk with Tannehill, maybe teach him how to be, I don't know, more reckless with the football. Like, that's why everybody loves Matt Moore, because he has this like Brett Favre mentality of, I'm going to throw the ball and he better be there to catch it or everything's going to go wrong. I guess that's why he's better at throwing the deep ball, because he really doesn't he doesn't really care what happens. But I mean, hey, he's the best backup quarterback that was out there, unless you wanted to sign someone like Michael Vick, and I don't think anybody wants to do that.
Kathy, your thoughts, Matt Moore?
I'm so happy he's back. Yeah, I love Matt Moore. I've been a big fan of him as a backup quarterback. I don't want him to replace Tannehill. Let me make that clear. But I really think he's a great team player, and he's a good support for Ryan Tannehill. So I'm happy.
I agree too. I'm glad Matt Moore is back. He's one of the better backups in my opinion. It's kind of a mystery thing to Matt Moore, because I looked around the league and I see all these signings like Josh McNown and Matt Castle.
I don't understand the love affair with McCown. I really don't.
Well, what I don't get is, like, I don't even hear Moore going to make visits, or and they paid him about half of what they paid him last year, and so clearly the market wasn't there for him, and I'm not sure why that was, but I mean, it works to the Dolphins' advantage just because he's a good backup quarterback. So I was happy to get him back. But for all these people out there that are suggesting to start Matt Moore over Ryan Tannehill, my question would be is, if Matt Moore were that good, why wasn't everybody out there pursuing him like crazy as a free agent?
Because Ryan Fitzpatrick was a top 10 quarterback last year. Don't you read the QB ratings?
Yeah, I don't know. To me, you guys touched on what Matt Moore is good at. I mean, he does throw some pretty deep balls, but he's more reckless with the football. I've seen multiple reports. He's makes more mistakes in practice. He's not as consistent, and so he's probably not an ideal quarterback for the Bill Lazor offense. But he's a guy you can put in there on short notice, and he plays with enough, I guess, the wild gunslinger mentality that he can still effectively run the offense if you need to. So
yeah, someone just mentioned in a live chat that Matt Moore is not a good fit for the offense, and I agree, he's not a good fit. And I said this when Tavares Jackson. Tavares Jackson is a much better fit for this offense. But the fact is, if Tannehill, God forbid, ever goes down, if you can count on someone to win you a string of consecutive games and go on a streak, it is someone like Matt Moore. The Dolphins would obviously have to adjust the offense a little bit on the fly, but it's something that Lazor can certainly do, and that's what I think the Dolphins really value more so than the system fit, but the fact that he can still continue to lead this team down the right path if Tannehill were ever to get injured, and I feel very comfortable with Moore coming in and leading the charge if that were to happen.
Exactly. Moore's won football games. Moore's won football games with the Dolphins. I don't know anything. What was the last thing that Tavares Jackson actually did that was significant in the NFL?
Well, I just look at like how many teams every year do you see their seasons just get ended when they lose their starting quarterback because they don't.
Tavares Jackson has a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah,
as a bench warmer.
Still has a ring. His grandkids won't know he's a bench warmer.
He was a possible number two. I didn't have a problem with Tavares Jackson as their number two quarterback, but I would rather have Matt Moore.
Absolutely. All right, so again, another big signing for the Dolphins that's been overlooked. But when you're the backup quarterback, everyone chants your name until you get in the game, and then everyone realizes why you were the backup anyways. But of course, Matt Moore provides many different things in the game. Hopefully, we don't see him this year because obviously that means Tannehill is healthy, alive, and he's doing well. All right, so we talked about a bunch of stuff tonight. We recapped the owners' meetings this week in Phoenix. We talked about Joe Philbin's one-year extension, about Dion Jordan staying at defensive end, his possible, why aren't they moving him to linebacker, different theories for that. Talked about Koa Misi, talked about the simpler defensive schemes that are coming this year for the Dolphins. We also talked about the smoke screens, possible smoke screens with the draft of Billy Turner and Dallas Thomas at the offensive guard position. In terms of the contradictions between Stephen Ross and Joe Philbin on Ryan Tannehill's deep ball, we analyzed that. We talked about what is in fact limiting Tannehill's deep ball, and the fact that as a fan, as just a regular casual fan, which Stephen Ross acts like, of course you're going to just see deep ball incompletion after incompletion and think that it's all on Tannehill, but in fact, it is much, much more than that. We talked about the key re-signings that flew under the radar, Luis Delmas, Matt Moore. Talked about the injury status of Delmas and Branden and the possibility of the Dolphins re-signing Knowshon Moreno after the draft going into training camp. A lot of stuff happened in this week for the Miami Dolphins. We have a little over 30 days left before the NFL draft when things get a little more crazier. It's going to be really exciting to see how the Dolphins shape this roster moving forward. They're on the right track. They've done a great job so far this offseason. Mike Tannenbaum is doing a hell of a job as the executive vice president of football operations, and I think they can only go up from here. We'll see. Of course, you can screw up the draft a lot, and many fans will get upset. But, that's why they say wait a few years before you judge a draft class, because the instant reaction is great, but really once they step on that field, it can all change in a second. We thank you guys for joining us this week. Last week we had over 1,000 of you download our podcast. We thank you for your support. We hope you enjoyed it like I just said. We hope you have a great weekend, a great week, and we'll see you next time on the PhinManiacs.com podcast.